Hi, welcome to Wilson Bridge. My name is Brian Drew, Senior Strategist at Wilson Advertising.
And I'm Devin Meister, Content Director.
And today we're going to be talking about brand first. We've talked a little bit about it on Wilson Bridge, but it's a philosophical disposition that we have at Wilson Advertising. And what we mean by that is that your company's position in the market is primarily directed by the personality of your brand. And that personality of your brand is a part of three main elements. One is that it's a purpose-driven personality. The roots of the company, the origin of the company, the spirit of it being founded had to do with someone saying, hey, there's a better way to do this, or this is something that's innovative that people need. This is a solution or a service or a product that's going to make people's lives better, and that your content and your creative is about that purpose-driven personality. The second is that it's unified across the business. So it's not just your typical standardization of good brand management, font, color, and shape, and all that stuff. It's also that unified across the business is the management of data and customer information in a way where the personality comes out of all of the different kinds of communication that's done, both internal and external. And then lastly, customer engagement optimization, which is bridging the gap between the technology used to voice your brand and the actual personality of the brand. So what are the right channels and the right cadence and execution of those channels? So that's our overall meaning when we say a philosophical disposition. We believe that the most important asset that a company has is its brand. The valuation of that brand, the company has the most control over, and that's really what a marketer's primary responsibility is. So, and what we want to do on this episode of Wilson Bridge is talk about a specific company and brand, Procter Gamble's brand Tide, and their recent. Not that recent, right? But recent. Tide's a 70-some-year-old brand. Recent to Tide, they launched dry cleaners.
Right. So if you go back and if you look at the traditional definition of branding, Tide's a great example. So is Tide a laundry detergent, or is Tide the best way to get clothes clean?
Right.
So that's part of it. And so since the advent of the automatic washing machine, it's been a detergent. That was basically it. But they've also, P&G's always had a big R&D section, so they've been playing with different ideas. In the 90s, they had this a product that was supposed to be Dry-L, that was like a dry cleaning product for home, which put a lot of dry cleaners on notice that, hey, Procter & Gamble is interested in the space with Tide to get clean clothes, not just laundry detergent.
Sure.
Well, in 2008, they launched a series of, a bunch of franchise model for dry cleaning. So they're standalone stores. They infuse the clothes with the Tide scent. They're all Tide branded with back to the fonts and colors. They look like Tide. It smells like Tide. It walks like Tide. Only it's dry cleaning. You drop your clothes off, pick them up later.
Super convenient too.
Super convenient.
Like the 24-hour.
Yep. So that plays in a couple of different audiences potentially, I think. So seniors that move to Florida, these are all over the country, but kind of not in the traditional dry cleaning areas you might think.
Right.
Not some of the bigger cities are missing these franchises. But throughout the South, throughout some of the Midwest, places where maybe not everything gets dry cleaned, but it's just part of their habits possibly. It also has a bigger floor print on the stores.
So if we fast forwarded 11, 12 years ago when this was sort of being strategized at Procter & Gamble, if we're consulting them on this move, what's the brand first position here? How do you see this decision to create chains of franchise dry cleaners with the name Tide, the personality of Tide, the scent? How do you see that falling in line with brand first?
I believe it falls in line with brand first because if you go back to Tide's the best way to get clothes clean, and you look at this new generations coming up that maybe, want convenience, don't want to do laundry if there's a way to get out of, but they still, there's still a sense of nostalgia of, I still want my clothes to smell like this. Right. I don't want the scratchy collar. I don't want the stiff. I'm not wearing the same clothes. The work casual environment where people aren't wearing ties every day or more expensive work clothes or church clothes, you just need clothes that are clean and you want them to smell a certain way that they're familiar with. I think it makes pretty good sense, although it is a big departure from the rest of Procter & Gamble's other models in the consumer goods.
Correct, and particularly from the fact that they're franchises.
Exactly.
But wouldn't so. So it's not a complete deviation from the personality of the brand, because if we say, because you got to talk about millennials here, right? Mm-hmm. It's a large demographic of people that are getting older, and their purchasing power and disposable income's getting higher and higher, right? So important for a 7-decade-old brand to be paying attention to this market. And if we view Tide as in the personality and the relationship that individuals have with that brand, if we view the dry cleaner as merely an extension of how a household does laundry, and you may come from a household that your family used Tide, that using a Tide dry cleaner is just an extension of that relationship and that smell. And from that regard, I do believe it's true to the personality of the brand. And it can, and in particular, done under the right operational model, in terms of making money for Procter Gamble off of that brand, it could be a pretty safe leverage of a very strong asset that they have. Where I see the potential pitfall is if they're wrong about the assumption that it's an extension of how laundry is done today. This might not necessarily mean that it isn't a brand first, because it's certainly brand's risk on the table. I mean, they're putting the brand out there in jeopardy. And where I could potentially see the jeopardy is well, what if dry cleaning is just really a dying business? I know the global or maybe probably national revenues are on the decline, and is doing laundry the traditional way how millennials view. Is dry cleaning an extension of traditional laundry service? Is that?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to see it as a growth industry. I think it peaked the year they started the franchise at like 11 billion, and now it's down to like 9 billion, which is, it's not a precipitous drop, but it's pretty steady decline in 10 years. But, if you're going to get somebody to go to dry cleaning, are they going to go to a mom and pop first, or is it going to be to, what is going to be that step of new households being established with their laundry? What would make them take that step?
If you look at the map of where Tide is putting their dry cleaners, it's in suburban Midwest South. There are some in the West, a handful in like Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and there's one in New Jersey, or there's some in New Jersey. But for the most part, this is a Midwestern, Southern, suburban thing. And Midwestern, Southern, suburban, is that where the core of millennials are in their spend? They're notably Tide dry cleaners is missing from Oregon, Washington, California, New York, Massachusetts, which I think is notable, considering the fact that it's a franchise model, and there's opportunity, right? And
right.
So one being the geographically they've positioned themselves in a suburban, Midwestern, Southern spot. The other thing is if dry cleaning is dying off, and that sort of more gentle wash and fold service is what's taking precedence. They call it the pajama culture. Dry cleaning might be dying because there's a lot of business casual wear, or your shirts don't need ironed or as much attention. They can be a little bit more wrinkled. That could be playing a role, as well as environmental concerns.
Right.
I know that Tide dry cleaners use D5, which is sort of like a green earth solution, but there's also some science and research that's suggesting D5 is not as environmentally friendly as maybe we think that it is. So there are some questions about environmental standards. There are some questions of whether or not dry cleaning in and of itself is just a dying industry based on culture. And then there's a question of, why are they lagging after all of these years of launching it? Why are they lagging in some of the main growth spots? Washington, D.C., New York City, San Francisco.
Yeah, you got to think it's intentional, and it would be really interesting to know their long play on that, because one thought I had is it could just be a a lot of research. It could just be a bunch of research labs. If we are going to be concerned with water and the environment, if you can get to a dry cleaning solution that they can successfully implement at home that doesn't use or uses a lot less water outside the machines, that could be a huge play going into a lot of different markets.
So and exactly, yeah. I mean, the bet is they're in the parts of the country where people drive. They're in the parts of the country where I think the 24-hour service might be particularly convenient. But are they putting their brand on an industry that's dying for cultural reasons and for environmental reasons? And is that not brand first, right? It's if they're right about their market research, and this is the appropriate way to extend Tide's relationship with households, because dry cleaning is an extension of laundry, clean clothes, and feeling good, then it works. But if they're tying the brand to something that's ultimately dying, and ultimately, while it might be hanging on culturally in Kansas City and Indianapolis, Columbus or Cincinnati, while it might be hanging on there, is that shifting, and is this really not a service millennials are going to be using? And in that long term, they have to be very focused on, because in the franchise model, there's a lot of individuals that are putting a lot of money at stake for this to succeed. So, well, that's all the time that we have. And be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.